Initial assessment of planet Terra, local designation Earth. Standard galactic date 47,392.6. Ambassador Krix dictated into his neural recorder, his four eyes blinking in perfect bureaucratic synchronization. Primary evaluation team consists of myself and senior xenobiologist Zarn. May the records show we are both extremely qualified and would rather be anywhere else. The sleek diplomatic vessel settled onto the designated landing pad in what the locals called Alice Springs. Krix adjusted his ceremonial sash, making sure all 17 medals of mediocrity were perfectly aligned. Behind him, Zarn was already complaining about the atmospheric composition. 13% less oxygen than optimal, Zarn muttered, consulting his atmospheric analyzer. How do they even survive? And this gravity practically barbaric. Krix nodded sagely, his head tendrils rippling with professional disdain. Remember, Zarn, we're here because regulations require us to evaluate all potentially sentient species, even the ones that evolved on. He consulted his datapad, ... rocks. The welcome committee awaiting them consisted of 3 humans in what appeared to be formal attire, though Krix noted with disapproval that none of them wore proper ceremonial tentacle covers. The tallest one stepped forward, extending a horrifyingly rigid appendage in what their cultural briefing had warned was a standard greeting. G-Day. I'm Director Matthews from the Interspecies Relations Committee. Welcome to Earth. Krix performed the mandatory tentacle wave of diplomatic acknowledgement while keeping a safe distance from the human's ossified greeting appendage. We are honored to conduct this evaluation of your world's qualification for galactic membership. Though I must note that your atmosphere is substandard and your gravity is most inconvenient. Matthews maintained what Krix's xenocultural database identified as a smile, though it seemed suspiciously like a threat display. Well, we can't all be perfect, but I reckon you'll find Earth has its charms. Zarn had already pulled out his bioscanner, waving it at a nearby tree. Fascinating. Your flora appears to be made primarily of cellulose. How has it not collapsed under its own weight without proper chromium reinforcement? We find it works just fine, Matthews replied, that disturbing smile still in place. Now, I understand you're particularly interested in our wildlife. Ah yes, Krix said, his voice dripping with the special kind of condescension reserved for Class 7 developing worlds. Our preliminary scans indicated a concerning lack of naturally armored megafauna. No plasma-breathing creatures at all. Not a single silicon-based predator. How do you maintain ecological balance without at least 3 species of magnetic field manipulators? Matthews glanced at his colleagues, who were displaying the human expression for "here we go again." On our homeworld, Zarn added helpfully, pulling up a holographic display, even our smallest herbivores have titanium-reinforced exoskeletons and natural laser defense systems. This one, for example, is considered a pest species. The hologram showed a tank-sized creature that appeared to be made entirely of metal plates and death. That's impressive, Matthews said diplomatically. Though I should mention. And your predators, Krix interrupted, warming to his subject. Our scans showed they're made of actual organic tissue. How do they survive without quantum phase shifting abilities? No wonder your species had to develop artificial defenses. Simply fascinating, from an anthropological perspective, of course. Matthew's smile took on a quality that Krix's cultural database couldn't quite categorize. Well, tell you what, we've arranged a little tour of some of our wildlife sanctuaries. Give you a chance to see things up close and personal-like. Excellent, Zarn exclaimed, already adjusting his scientific observation visor. I look forward to documenting your planet's charming but primitive ecosystem. Perhaps we can even help you upgrade some species with proper defensive capabilities. As they followed Matthews toward a waiting transport vehicle, Krix made another neural recording addendum. Local fauna appears to be in desperate need of modernization, suggesting immediate implementation of Standard Galactic Wildlife Enhancement Protocol 7B. Assuming the specimens can survive the cybernetic augmentation process, these poor creatures clearly need our help. He didn't notice Matthews sending a quick message on his communication device. Operation Hubris is a go. Bringing them to see Barbara first. Yes, the saltwater croc. This is going to be good. Supplementary report, Krix dictated as their transport vehicle bounced along what the humans optimistically called a road. Local infrastructure appears to be as primitive as their wildlife. Requesting immediate motion sickness medication. They pulled up to a facility marked Northern Territory Wildlife Research Center where a sun-weathered human was waiting for them. He wore what appeared to be several deceased animals fashioned into protective gear and a hat that had clearly seen better decades. "Welcome to my humble workplace," the human said, taking a long sip from a battered container. "Name's Jack Monroe, but everyone calls me Croc. I'll be your guide today." Zarn's scanning visor whirred as he analyzed the human. "Fascinating. Your epidermal layer shows significant radiation damage from your local star. Yet you appear to have no natural UV-resistant plating. How inefficient." "Sunscreen and a good hat," Mate Croc replied, taking another sip. "Sometimes the simple solutions work best." "Ah yes," Krix said, adjusting his ceremonial sash. "The human predilection for primitive solutions. Speaking of which, we were promised a display of your local fauna." Croc's weathered face broke into what Krix was beginning to recognize as humanity's favorite threat display. "Right this way. We'll start with Barbara. She's in a good mood today, only tried to eat me twice during feeding." They approached a large enclosure containing what appeared to be a rather unimpressive body of water. Zarn immediately began taking readings. "Barely ionized. No trace of metallic content. How does anything survive in such basic dihydrogen monoxide?" The xenobiologist shook his head in disappointment. "And where is this specimen we're supposed to observe?" Croc leaned casually against the railing. "Oh, she's there. Barbara's just having a think about things. Like whether any of us would make a decent lunch." "Surely you jest," Krix scoffed. "Our scans indicated your aquatic predators lack even basic energy shields. What possible threat could?" The water exploded. Later, when filing his official report, Krix would deny that the sound he made was a shriek. He would describe it as a diplomatic exclamation of surprise. The security footage would suggest otherwise. Barbara, it turned out, was 6 meters of pure ancient predator, and she had decided to demonstrate why evolution had kept her design largely unchanged for millions of years. She launched herself 3/4 out of the water, massive jaws spanning a gap that Krix's terrified brain calculated could easily fit himself and at least 2 other diplomats of similar size. "Sweet merciful void," Zarn screamed, his scientific equipment clattering to the ground as he backpedaled so fast he tangled his tentacles. "Where are its defense weaknesses? Why is it all teeth?" "That there's a saltwater crocodile," Croc said calmly, not even spilling his drink as Barbara crashed back into the water, sending a spray that caused both aliens to huddle behind him. "She's one of our smaller ones." Smaller. Krix's voice had risen several octaves. "This is a juvenile specimen." "Nah, full grown. But you should see some of the big ones." Barbara surfaced again, this time just her eyes above the water, watching them with what Krix swore was calculation. Pure, predatory calculation. But Zarn was frantically consulting his databases. No energy weapons, no armor plating, not even basic radioactive capabilities. "Don't need him," Croc said, reaching for what appeared to be a large piece of meat. "When you're the perfect killing machine, you stick with what works. Watch this." Before either alien could protest, Croc tossed the meat high into the air. Barbara erupted from the water again, snatching it with a snap that echoed like thunder. Both aliens instinctively grabbed each other. "Impossible," Zarn whispered. "The bite force readings. They're higher than a Class 3 battle cyborg." "Now," Croc said, that disturbing smile growing wider, "who'd like to help with the feeding demonstration? We've got some nice whole chickens here." "Urgent addendum to previous report," Krix dictated as he backed away, dragging Zarn with him. "Requesting immediate revision of preliminary species assessment. Also requesting change of undergarments." "Oh, come on," Croc called after them. "Barbara hasn't had alien before. Could be a learning experience for everyone." As they huddled by the transport vehicle, Zarn turned all 4 eyes to Krix. Perhaps we should reevaluate our position on natural evolutionary defenses." "Agreed," Krix said, trying to restore dignity to his quivering tentacles. "But surely this is an outlier. Their other species can't possibly be as concerning." From inside the research center, they heard Matthews chuckling as he read a message on his communication device. "Right, they've just prepped the box jellyfish tank for your next stop." Both aliens pretended they didn't hear that. Some things were better left unknown. Unfortunately for them, their official evaluation protocol required a minimum of 5 species observations. Barbara was only the beginning. Supplemental observation log Zarn dictated, his scientific pride somewhat recovered after the crocodile incident. Having survived an encounter with an obviously exceptional specimen, we now proceed to examine more typical examples of Terra's underdeveloped aquatic life. They stood before a surprisingly modest tank in the marine research section. Krix had positioned himself firmly behind both Croc and Matthews, his tentacles still occasionally twitching at unexpected noises. This Zarn scoffed, pressing his face close to the glass. "This is your next specimen. I can barely see anything in there. Where are the titanium-plated gill structures, the plasma-generating organs?" Matthews and Croc exchanged that look again, the one that Krix was beginning to associate with imminent regret. "That there's a box jellyfish," Croc said, taking an exaggerated step backward. "Might want to give it a bit more space, mate." "Space?" From this transparent blob, Zarn laughed, his scientific arrogance in full bloom. "My preliminary scan shows no obvious weapons, no defensive capabilities, not even a proper nervous system. How does it even?" "It's the most venomous creature in Earth's oceans," Matthews interrupted. "One touch from those tentacles can kill a human in under 3 minutes. Some victims have been known to die of shock from the pain alone." Zarn's face pressed against the glass went from grey to pale white. "I'm sorry, did you say? Pain?" "Oh yeah," Croc nodded enthusiastically. "The venom's so powerful it attacks your cellular structures directly. Your nerve endings go into complete overdrive. Some say it feels like being burned, electrocuted, and stabbed all at once. Modern medicine can barely touch it." The xenobiologist slowly, very slowly, backed away from the tank. "But our scans showed no energy weapons." "Don't need energy weapons when you've got evolved chemical warfare," Matthews said cheerfully. "Nature's funny that way." "Speaking of funny," Croc added, already walking toward another enclosure, "wait until you meet our next friend. Ever heard of a platypus?" Krix consulted his database. "Ah, yes, one of your egg-laying mammals. Another evolutionary dead end, clearly. Though I must admit, the design appears to have been created during some sort of cosmic clerical error." "Oh, it's got a few surprises," Matthews said. "Like the venomous spurs on the males." Both aliens stopped mid-step. "The what on the what?" "Venomous spurs," Croc repeated, reaching into an enclosure to lift out what appeared to be several different animals poorly assembled into one creature. "Only mammals known to produce true venom. Causes pain so bad that morphine doesn't help. Modern medicine still can't fully treat it." Zarn's scientific visor was working overtime. But it looks like it was assembled from spare parts. How can it be venomous? Where are its defense mechanisms?" "That's the neat part," Matthews grinned. "The venom's just a backup. These little fellows can also detect electrical signals from their prey's muscles, even through solid ground." What? Krix yelped, jumping onto a nearby bench. "That's impossible without proper quantum sensing arrays." "Nature finds a way," Croc said sagely, setting the platypus back in its enclosure. "Now, who wants to see our spider collection?" "Absolutely not," both aliens shouted in unison. Supplemental report, Krix dictated frantically. "Urgent notice to all galactic scientific bodies. Terra's evolution has taken a distinctly aggressive turn toward chemical warfare. Previous assumptions about required technological development for lethal capabilities appear to be critically flawed. Also noting that size appears to have no correlation with capacity for inflicting horrific pain." "Oh, come on," Matthews said, already leading them toward another section. "The spiders aren't that bad. Now, the blue-ringed octopus, on the other hand." Zarn Krix whispered to his companion, "I'm beginning to think we may have made some incorrect assumptions about this planet's wildlife." "Nonsense," Zarn replied, though his scientific confidence was noticeably shakier. "These must be outliers, statistical anomalies. There's no way their entire ecosystem could be this." He trailed off as they entered a room filled with terrariums containing creatures of various sizes, all labeled with bright warning signs. "Right," Croc announced, rubbing his hands together with disturbing enthusiasm. "Who wants to learn about cone snails? They're like tiny harpoon guns filled with neurotoxin." Both aliens suddenly discovered they had urgent diplomatic calls to make. Unfortunately, their retreat was blocked by Matthews, who was reading from a tablet with far too much enjoyment. According to the evaluation protocols you provided, he said, we still have 2 more categories of wildlife to cover. Shall we head to the rainforest exhibit next? I hear the poison dart frogs are particularly active today. Addendum to previous report, Krix muttered into his recorder, requesting immediate protocol revision regarding mandatory species observation requirements, also requesting hazard pay, retroactively. Mandatory observation log, Zarn dictated, his voice noticeably less enthusiastic than when they'd started. Having survived encounters with various chemical warfare specialists disguised as wildlife, we now proceed to examine Terra's rainforest biome. May the void have mercy on our souls. The research center's rainforest exhibit was a massive enclosed space, thick with vegetation and heavy with humidity. Krix's tentacles were beginning to wilt. Fascinating environmental control system you have here, he said, desperate to delay the inevitable. The primitive but charming way you've recreated a natural habitat using only basic technology is something moving in that tree. Good eye, Matthews said. That's just Gerald, one of our Brazilian wandering spiders. Fascinating creatures. Their bite can cause all sorts of interesting effects, including... Not interested in effects, Krix announced, setting a new personal record for diplomatic speed, walking in the opposite direction. Fair enough, Croc shrugged. Let's move on to something smaller then. See these little colorful fellows? He pointed to what appeared to be tiny, brightly colored amphibians. They looked almost decorative, like living jewels. Zarn's scientific curiosity temporarily overcame his survival instinct. Ah, finally, something harmless. Based on their size and coloration, these must be some form of ornamental species, perhaps used in primitive religious ceremonies. Golden poison dart frog, Matthews said cheerfully. One of the most toxic creatures on Earth. A single frog carries enough poison to kill 10 fully grown humans, or, by my calculations, about 3 pompous alien diplomats. But they're so small, Krix protested. And colorful. Why would evolution make something so deadly look so friendly? It's called aposematic coloration, Croc explained, clearly enjoying himself. Bright colors in nature usually mean touch me and die, like a warning label, but more stylish. Zarn was frantically updating his database. This contradicts every evolutionary theory we have. Deadly creatures are supposed to be large, armored, not decorative. Oh, you'll love this next bit then, Matthews said, leading them deeper into the exhibit. Let me tell you about parasitic wasps. Parasitic? What both aliens asked, immediately regretting the question. Wonderful examples of evolutionary efficiency, Croc continued. They paralyze their prey, lay eggs inside them, and when the larvae hatch... Stop, Krix held up all 4 hands. Please tell me you're describing some sort of military weapon system. Nope. Just regular old wasps. Nature's own little horror show. Some species even have mind-controlling venom that turns their victims into zombie guardians for their eggs. Zarn's scientific visor cracked slightly as his eye stalks widened to their limit. Mind. Controlling. Venom. Amazing. Isn't it? Matthews beamed. No fancy technology needed. Just millions of years of evolution figuring out the most efficient way to be absolutely terrifying. Urgent addendum to all previous reports, Krix dictated, his voice reaching previously undiscovered octaves. Terra's evolution appears to have taken a distinctly horrifying approach to survival mechanisms, requesting immediate reclassification of planet's threat level and possibly some form of therapy. Now, Croc said soothingly, we haven't even gotten to the really interesting stuff yet. Want to learn about army ants? They form living bridges with their bodies to cross gaps, and when they swarm. Fascinating, but no thank you, both aliens shouted, now actively retreating toward the exit. But we haven't even covered the bullet ants yet, Matthews called after them. Their sting pain index is rated as pure, intense, brilliant pain. Like walking over flaming charcoal with a 3-inch nail embedded in your heel. Why, Zarn whimpered, all scientific pretense abandoned. Why would evolution do this? That's nothing, Croc added. Wait until you see what we've got planned for the African safari portion of the tour. Ever heard of a hippopotamus? Krix checked his diplomatic protocols database with trembling tentacles. Please tell me we've fulfilled the minimum observation requirements. According to your own regulations, Matthews said, consulting his tablet with obvious relish, we still need to document at least one large land-based predator or aggressive herbivore. Lucky for you, we've got both. Though I should warn you, the honey badger's been a bit grumpy lately. Final addendum, Krix whispered into his recorder. Beginning to suspect this entire planet is actually a highly elaborate biological weapons testing facility. Current working theory, local species engaged in evolutionary arms race that went horribly wrong. Or possibly horribly right, depending on one's perspective on existential terror. Final mandatory observation log, Zarn dictated, his scientific tone now completely replaced by barely contained hysteria. Having confirmed that Terra's rainforest biome is actually a testing ground for chemical and psychological warfare, we proceed to our last required habitat evaluation. May whatever entities govern this universe have mercy on us. The African savanna exhibit stretched before them, a carefully maintained slice of grassland that seemed suspiciously peaceful after their previous experiences. Right then, Matthews said, checking his tablet. We've arranged a special treat. You'll get to observe both our largest land predator and our most dangerous herbivore. Surely, Krix said, desperately clinging to his diplomatic composure, surely there can't be anything more concerning than what we've already witnessed. Croc's weather-beaten face broke into that now dreaded smile. Ever wonder why we built these observation platforms so high off the ground? As if on cue, something massive emerged from the artificial watering hole. Both aliens instinctively moved behind their human guides. Meet Herbert, Matthews announced proudly. 3 tons of hippopotamus with a bite force that can crush a small boat. Responsible for more human fatalities in Africa than any other large animal. But it's an herbivore, Zarn protested weakly. It eats plants. Why does it need to crush boats? Because it can, Croc replied simply. Herbert here's actually quite calm compared to wild hippos. They've been known to attack boats unprovoked, chase people on land at surprisingly high speeds, and generally react to everything as if it personally insulted their mother. Herbert chose that moment to demonstrate his infamous yawn, displaying a cavernous mouth full of teeth that looked specifically designed to haunt alien nightmares. That's not an herbivore, Krix shrieked, abandoning all diplomatic pretense. That's a tank with teeth. Oh no, Matthews corrected. That's just our friendly hippo. Now, if you want to see a real threat, he pointed to a small enclosure nearby. Meet Regina, our resident honey badger. Both aliens stared at the relatively small black and white creature. After everything they'd seen, they weren't fooled by its size. What does this one do? Zarn asked, already backing toward the exit. Spit acid? Shoot laser beams from its eyes? Release hallucinogenic spores? Nothing, that fancy Croc said. She just doesn't care. About anything. Lions? She'll fight them. Venomous snakes? That's lunch. Electric fences? More like suggestions. We've had to redesign her enclosure 17 times, and I'm pretty sure she just stays here because she finds our efforts amusing. As if to demonstrate, Regina casually began dismantling what appeared to be a reinforced steel feeding container, maintaining direct eye contact with the aliens the entire time. But how does it survive all that? Zarn's scientific visor was practically smoking as it tried to analyze the creature. No natural armor, no energy shields, no obvious weapons systems. Pure attitude, Matthews explained. They're basically evolution's way of saying hold my beer and watch this. I don't understand that reference, Krix said faintly. But I'm terrified anyway. Regina had finished destroying the feeding container and was now examining the enclosure walls with what appeared to be professional interest. Should we be concerned about that? Krix asked, noting the calculating look in the honey badger's eyes. Probably, Croc admitted. Might want to start moving toward the transport vehicle. She's got that look again. What look? The sound of bending metal answered Krix's question. Regina had apparently decided that today was a good day for an impromptu structural integrity test of her enclosure. Emergency protocol activation, Krix screamed, all 4 arms grabbing Zarn. Immediate evacuation required. But we haven't even shown you the lions yet, Matthews called after their retreating forms. Or the African wild dogs. They're basically democracy but with teeth. Final addendum to all reports, Krix dictated as they fled, his words coming in panicked bursts. Terra's wildlife has achieved perfect fusion of maximum lethality and minimum survival requirements through pure evolutionary spite. Requesting immediate elevation of planet's threat classification to absolutely not, also requesting transfer to nice, safe desk job. Behind them, they could hear Croc radioing for the maintenance team. Yeah, Regina's doing her remodeling thing again. No, don't bother with the reinforced panels this time. You know she just takes those as a personal challenge. The emergency session of the Galactic Wildlife Classification Committee, the High Chancellor's voice echoed through the conference chamber. We are gathered to hear the testimony of Ambassador Krix and Senior Xenobiologist Zarn regarding their evaluation of planet Terra, designation Earth. Krix and Zarn stood before the assembled council, their tentacles still occasionally twitching at sudden movements. Both had refused to remove their newly acquired personal shield generators. Esteemed council members, Krix began, his voice only cracking slightly. I come before you to request an immediate reclassification of Terra's threat level, with particular emphasis on their wildlife classification. Surely it can't be that bad, one council member scoffed. Our preliminary scans showed no energy weapons, no natural armor plating, not even basic radioactive capabilities. Zarn's eye stalks all twisted in different directions, a sign of severe scientific PTSD. We were so wrong. So very, very wrong. Please elaborate, the High Chancellor said, leaning forward with interest. Terra's evolution took a different path, Krix explained, consulting his trauma-induced notes. Instead of developing proper civilized defensive capabilities like armor plating or energy weapons, their wildlife specialized in alternative approaches. The alternative approaches. They have creatures that kill with a touch, Zarn interjected, his scientific composure completely abandoned. Predators that don't even need to digest you properly because their venom liquefies your internal organs. Herbivores that will destroy you out of sheer irritation. And then there's the honey badger. He trailed off, shuddering. Surely you're exaggerating, another council member said. What about their apex predators? They all apex predators, both aliens shouted in unison. Krix collected himself slightly. Even their primitive chemical defense mechanisms are beyond our current understanding. We have trade agreements with 17 different chemical warfare research facilities, and none of them have developed anything close to what their box jellyfish produces naturally. And the parasitic wasps, Zarn added, his voice rising hysterically. They've evolved mind control. Natural mind control. Do you have any idea what that means for our understanding of evolutionary warfare? The council chambers erupted in confused murmuring. The High Chancellor raised all 6 hands for silence. What is your official recommendation? Krix straightened his ceremonial sash, which now included a new medal for survival against all logical probability. I recommend immediate classification of Terra as a Class X wildlife preserve with mandatory warning buoys in a 50 light-year radius. All approach vectors should include the warning everything here can and will kill you, possibly out of spite. Isn't that a bit extreme? Chancellor Zarn said, pulling up his research data. They have a creature called a platypus that looks like it was assembled from spare parts, sweats milk, has venomous spurs, and can detect electrical signals through solid ground. And that's one of their less concerning species. The council spent several hours reviewing their evidence, including video footage that caused several members to faint and one to request immediate retirement. Very well, the High Chancellor finally announced. Based on this testimony, we hereby classify Terra as a Class X wildlife preserve. All galactic citizens are required to sign extensive warning waivers before approaching the system. Additional classification note. This is not a challenge. Do not attempt to prove your superiority to local fauna. You will lose. One final item, Krix added, regarding their application for galactic membership. Yes. I suggest we approve it immediately. Not out of recognition of their technological achievements, but out of sheer self-preservation. I've seen what their wildlife can do. I don't want to imagine what happens when they start applying that evolutionary expertise to spacecraft design. The motion passed unanimously. Back on Earth, Director Matthews received the approval notification with a grin. Well, that worked out nicely. Should we tell them about the inland taipan? Or the Portuguese Mano War? Or maybe the bullet ant colonies? Croc looked up from where he was helping reinstall Regina's enclosure walls for the 18th time. Nah, let's save something for their next visit. Besides, Regina's already planning her next renovation project. Apparently she's taken their reaction as a personal challenge. Addendum to final report. Krix's voice echoed through the galactic archives. Note to all future diplomatic missions: when Terrans smile and say, "Would you like to see something interesting?" the correct answer is no.